I didn't think I heard, because everybody's talking. One, two. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the second one of our talks in the series Groundbreakers. We are going to be talking in English, of course, for our guests. And as you probably, some of you might remember from the first one, for this series, we invite people who are doing really special projects, doing things differently, are thinking about the art world in a different way. And I must say that when I was thinking of this series, the first person I thought of was Diana, because she has really been making a huge difference in the area where she works, but also generally in the way things are done in art. I will read her biography because I couldn't possibly remember everything, but also I think it's important for all of you to know a little bit about her. So Diana Campbell is a Princeton-educated American curator who has been working in South and Southeast Asia since 2010, primarily in India, Bangladesh, and the Philippines. Since 2013, she has served as the founding artistic director of the Dhaka-based Samdani Art Foundation in Bangladesh and chief curator of the very critically acclaimed Daka Art Summit. Don't worry, we will explain all that later. Daka Art Summit is a continuous, ongoing curatorial project which builds infrastructure and new models for contemporary art making and public engagement with culture. Diana Campbell has developed the Daka Art Summit into a leading research and exhibitions platform in South Asia, bringing together artists, architects, curators, and writers from across South Asia through a largely commission-based model where new work and exhibitions are born in Bangladesh. In addition to her exhibitions making practice, Diana Campbell is responsible for developing the Samdani Art Foundation collection. She drives the international collaborations at the head of opening the foundation's permanent home, and if I pronounce it right, Srihata, the Samdani Art Center, you will see all that later, and Sculpture Park in Sylhet. Concurrent to her work in Bangladesh from 2016 to 2018, she was also the founding artistic director of Bella's Artist Projects in the Philippines, a non-profit international residency and exhibition program with sites in Manila and Bataan. She also, as if all this is not enough, curated frieze projects in London for the 2018 and 2019 editions. She also curated last year, co-curated Desert X with Neville Wakefield, the Coachella Valley project in California, and she is also in one of the group of A-Field, an international network of socially engaged artistic practices, and she has also been published in Moose, Frieze Art in America, Museum of Modern Art, and others. So one of the reasons that I really wanted to invite Diana to talk to us was the fact that I was reading everywhere that Daka Art Summit has been so amazingly successful with the local audience, and that they went from 20,000 visitors to 500,000 visitors in a few years. And just so that you understand the numbers a little bit, Daka Art Summit is like a festival that takes place in like 9 days, a week, and they get 500,000 people. Venice Biennale gets, I think, 800,000 people all summer, right? So this was an incredible number. But through reading about the whole project and getting to know Diana better, I realized that there are three things that we're going to touch on tonight. The success of Daka Art Summit in the area and how much loved it is by the people. But also, you probably remember from our title, there is a second part that says that how to change the world and to make the world in the way we want in the art world, okay? How to create the kind of art world we want to see. This was added by Diana in our title, and now I understand why, because she will talk to us about all that later. And the third aspect will be really about the way that Diana thinks about all this, because I think it's very much also part of her thinking what created this whole different way of doing things in Bangladesh. But because most of you, including myself in the beginning, we don't know enough about Daka Art Summit, I think I will first ask Diana to talk to us about the summit. And the way we'll do it tonight is, instead of a talk, I'll be sort of stopping her to clarify and sort of touch upon some points while you're talking, because she has so much beautiful material that I think it will be amazing just to even watch it. But we will stop you and ask you some questions on the way. So.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Afroditi and the Cycladic Museum. And also, thank you very much to some people in this room that have played a core part in supporting the Daka Art Summit's growth, my personal and professional growth. It really means a lot. And maybe before I start this presentation, I also want to point out that one of our artists is in the room who was in the last summit, Ahmet Ogud, who's opening a show at the State of Concept in Athens. His work, I don't have images of his work in this presentation because you need to go see it live here in your own city. So maybe as I start, and I'll also say that when I get nervous, I tend to speak very quickly. So if I'm talking too fast, just give me a sign and I'll slow down. But I guess when we say Daka Art Summit, the thing that I think that makes this project most special is the Daka part. And as Afroditi said, I don't think that, let's just say, audience numbers can be a really dangerous thing to measure success by. But in Daka Art Summit, I would say it's a little bit different, because most of these people have never seen a contemporary art exhibition in the way that we know contemporary art before. But the reason that the numbers keep growing is because they feel more and more confident and more that it's theirs. And I'm going to show you a video that my team made. It's a little bit stylized. So the gray background is not a technical issue. It's just how they decided to show it, but how they wanted to depict crowds or the audience in our 2023 Daka Art Summit, which had 577,000 people visiting in 9 days. And you'll see it's primarily local people. It's young people, old people, people from all kind of walks of life. It's free, it's ticketless, there are no VIP hours, so everyone has equal access. So our audience is local people from Dhaka, international visiting curators, museum directors, curators, but they're all engaging with the same material in the same terms. We've had 6 editions so far, but we're different from, even though we tend to happen every 2 years, Bangladesh actually has the oldest existing biennale that still exists in Asia. It was started in 1981, which I'll talk about in a bit. But we really want it to be a place that brings that joy of coming together and also use the means we have to do the best that we can do. We can't afford to do a 3-month show, nor do I think is it safe for the artworks with audience numbers like this to put them in those conditions. And I'm going to kind of walk you through how the summit has developed into what it is now, and it's constantly morphing, it's constantly changing. For those of you who have seen multiple editions, they are responding to each other, challenging each other, so nothing really looks the same.
And before we go into our first image, just to clarify, the Daka Art Summit is part of the Samdani Foundation.
Yes.
Which is, you want to tell us a little bit about the foundation?
So the reason this all started is that there is a young collector couple. Their names are Nadia and Rajib Samdani. When we met, Nadia was in her late 20s, Rajib was in his late 30s, and they were young collectors at the beginning of their journey from Bangladesh. They live in Bangladesh, and as they were traveling, they saw no Bangladeshi artists in art fairs, museums, biennales, and that whenever they talked about where they were from, people would bring up poverty, floods. There was anything positive that was brought up. And they really love artists, and they knew that they could maybe only sponsor a few artists to go abroad for projects, so they wanted to create a project that would actually bring people to Bangladesh to learn about the art in its context, but also to lend this platform to artists from other contexts such as Nepal, Myanmar, other contexts that maybe didn't have platforms to allow their artists to be part of these global systems.
And why you? How were you in the area? Why was it?
It had nothing to do with work. I had moved to India for my boyfriend, fiance at the time, and I grew up in New York, and actually my best friend in university, her family is related to this museum, so it's also a small world to be back in here. But it was this adventure where I thought I understood the world, and I was in my 20s and realized I really knew nothing from an American-centric education system. I should share that my mother's family comes from a small island called Guam, which is in the Pacific. And the issues in Guam are very similar to those of Bangladesh: a loss of language, challenges with climate change, colonization. Bangladesh used to be a colony, Guam is still a colony. So these perspectives really drive how this platform was driven. But what the Samdanis wanted, I guess when they hired me, was someone young to help be a partner with them to grow this platform for their artists. So we show 65% Bangladeshi artists. It's really about the Bangladeshi artists, but how to put them in dialogue with other things happening in other parts of the world. And to give you an example from my personal background, my great-grandmother was a subject of Spain, Japan, and the US, all within her lifetime without ever leaving. So it's also interesting how you can see migration as people moving to different countries, but different countries can move over people as well. So these are just some ideas that kind of keep growing as the summit develops. Yeah.
And maybe also the fact that it all takes place in one building.
Yes, so this is a government building. It's called the Shilpa Kala Academy. It's the National Academy for Fine and Performing Arts. So it would be like as if EMST gave over its space
Building.
or just kind of like Documenta, if that makes sense. But in this case, we're a local institution. The collection of this institution collected in the 80s, the collection is stored in this same building. People come for art events in this building all the time. People like Ahmed, who were exhibiting, also saw that during our install, there's other events, conferences happening. It's really a public building, if that makes sense.
Okay, I think that gives us a little bit of the background so that we can go on to...
So I should also say that this project is separate from the collection of the Samdanis. Sometimes we acquire works through the galleries from this exhibition, but it's really, we produce work. It's a primarily commissions-based model. The last summit, we had 160 artists, so it's a pretty large-scale project. But I'll kind of walk through the beginning. What's also interesting is that people assume that, we don't have the infrastructure to show certain types of artworks or certain artists, such as this artist that I will show. Actually, maybe I'll start there and then I'll go back. This artist, who many of you might be familiar with, Shazia Sikandar, she's a Pakistani-American artist. Until this point, she hadn't really exhibited in the region, and part of it was just that there weren't the conditions for her to do so. We didn't want to cut the quality of how we would show that work, so we really kind of tried to rise to the occasion. How can we create the infrastructure to show this work in the way that she wants it to be shown? And I bring this up as an example. So here you see all these school kids watching this 3-channel video, Parallax, which needs 3 Christie's projectors to show. For those of you who don't know what that is, each projector costs around $250,000. And this was like in 2014. I don't know how much that costs now. We clearly don't have that money, and you cannot even rent this stuff in Bangladesh. It's a developing country. There's nowhere to go to get this. But through kind of these relationships with artists and artist relationships with others, the Sharjah Art Foundation lent us these projectors to be able to show this for 9 days. And I use this as an example because it's only through partnering with others that we're able to do these sorts of things. And artists in Bangladesh had never seen work like this before. New media is not taught in the universities. There aren't museums that show this kind of work because there isn't the equipment. So part of it, and I'm going to go back to how we're developing the local scene, but part of it is also as an educational tool for artists that don't have the privilege to travel as we do. Before the pandemic, the Bangladeshi passport was the 9th least powerful one, meaning that getting visas is really, really difficult for these guys.
So from what I understand, like the original, let's say, goal or mission was to first of all educate, but also to give a platform to local artists, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. So here we have an exhibition that was curated by Deepak Anand, who's a Paris-based art historian of Indian origin, who curated a show called Bidesh, which Bidesh in Bengali means foreign or foreigner. So like if someone, let's say you have a relative that's outside, he's Bideshi, but it's also going to be a play on Bangladesh. And these kind of monochromatic works you're seeing on the left side of the image are by a Bangladeshi artist named Aisha Sultana. So at this point, Aisha was quite young. She's a Bangladeshi artist. She didn't have a gallery, but kind of through this experience at Daka Art Summit, she was signed by Experimenter Gallery. Her works are now in Tate, SF MoMA, museum collections all over the world, and actually she's able to, now support herself and her family solely as an artist and as a studio, which was something that was not really the case in the times around 2012. It was very rare that artists had studios. And this year,
Sorry to interrupt. Maybe also just mention what you were telling me about the fact that there isn't any other platform, right, for artists in the area. There is no contemporary museum? Or...
There are artist-led initiatives that are doing really incredible work. So artists are really building the infrastructure to support themselves and to show their work. So there's a lot of them that, they kind of open spaces above tanneries, or, there's a few small initiatives of local collectors, but the National Museum doesn't show contemporary art. Photography wasn't allowed in the Asian Art Biennial, which I'll talk about in a bit, which is a government biennial that when it started was extremely relevant and important, but kind of devolved into an embassy-driven project. But yeah, there's very few opportunities for contemporary artists to show their work to the public, but also to kind of have critical dialogue with others. There is an amazing photography school, world-class photography school called Pathshala in Dhaka that also has had a photo festival since 2000. We collaborate with them, but it's also interesting to see how through these collaborations, they've moved out of being really a documentary photography space into a fine art space, and we're kind of growing together. And so also in the summit, we started we don't have medium-specific shows anymore because we didn't want to have hierarchies between painting, photography, video, sculpture. So we play with those boundaries. But anyway, Aisha Sultana for us is a wonderful success story. So a few months ago, Art Basel just did a feature about her and how she works, which you can read online. But we never dreamed at the beginning of this project that we would have so many Bangladeshi artists, today. So guess what, over 10 years later, most biennials that you go to, you'll see a Bangladeshi artist, a lot of fairs, festivals, exhibitions, and that's really because of the power of the artist's work. It's just the role of the Daka Art Summit to help people be able to access it. We think long-term, so a lot of the people that we bring in to collaborate with us is also to build relationships with local Bangladeshi artists. So Nikhil Chopra, some of you may be familiar with him from Documenta in Athens. He's a leading performance artist in India. He has a space where he has residencies for performance artists, and he performed as a solo artist in 2014, and he led a series of workshops and curated an exhibition with Bangladeshi performance artists in 2016. These relationships still stay, but these experiences, because again, performance was not taught or even really accepted within the institutions in Bangladesh. One of our, most rewarding success stories is a young Bangladeshi artist named Yasmin Jahan Nupur. She made a performance which was called Let Me Get You a Nice Cup of Tea, which was basically going through, serving tea is such a British activity and associated with politeness, but it really has a terrible, ugly colonial undertone. So she kind of walks you through those steps. But Tate acquired this work, and this work is now on display. So we're having global institutions collecting very challenging work from Bangladesh, but the work is both accessible in Bangladesh and outside. It's not something where it's all being drained out. And in this image, you see her in dialogue with Nilama Sheikh, whose work you might remember from the Benaki Museum and Documenta here as well. So we try to bring as many artists to be able to be in dialogue and to influence and inspire each other. This is also an example how we realize that, as many of you might see, one of the big exports of Bangladesh, for better or for usually for worse, is labor. We realize that while we have 120% import tax on foreign art in Dhaka, we don't have art handlers, we don't have a lot of these infrastructures that people think they need to show art, but we have amazing, inspiring, and enthusiastic people. So here, for example, is an incredible performance by Ritu Sattar, a Bangladeshi artist who collaborated with musicians. So actually when you walked in, this was closed for a shoot, but you actually enter the building underneath the scaffolding. And this is a performance called Lost Tune, where there are musicians who are playing droning notes in harmoniums to protest the rise of fundamentalism in the region and how fewer and fewer people are taught music. We could afford to do the performance, but we couldn't afford to make a film. So we collaborated with the Liverpool Biennial, who produced the film. We produced the performance, and now it got delayed because of the COVID, but MoMA is going to show this piece. So both the performance and the film.
And
yes.
Can I interrupt
Yes.
there just to
Yeah.
say that another aspect
Yes.
of what you really try to do, and you mentioned a bit with the screens before, is to collaborate with a lot of other organizations so that, to make this happen, because otherwise it would have been impossible to
Absolutely.
roll through all this.
And then it's also really about supporting the artist. So imagine all the different curators that get to engage with this artist. And she, at this point, had never sold an artwork, doesn't have a gallery, and is in her 30s. And so what I love about this project is that the work can really stand for itself, and other things that you think you need from your CV or from a kind of prestige standpoint can fall. But again, this is like an iterative process of learning. Certain things that we would want to try in 2018 wouldn't have been possible without 2016, 2014. It's a lot of learning from mistakes or growing from experience. This is an image of 2016, and just to show you, you have like kind of these large white walls. So we kind of close the space to try to replicate like what a maybe museum might look like. And we realized over time that perhaps this isn't what we should be doing, and I'll get there in a minute. We also started commissioning works by artists from the region. So I love this project, which is by a Burmese artist named Popo, and he had a project called the VIP Project, where he would insert VIP signs in public bus stops and then kind of see how people would react to it. So Bangladesh also has this VIP culture. But what's interesting in Myanmar, which shares a border with Bangladesh, no one would question the VIP sign because it's kind of a military dictatorship. But in Bangladesh, some people did. So the behavior was different. But what was interesting about this project was that another biennial, the Asia Pacific Triennial in Australia, saw it when they did a studio visit with the artist and really wanted to show it. So we actually let them show it before us, because for us it's not really about that institutional ownership of the work, it's really about sharing and collaborating. Another thing is that Bangladesh has incredible modern art, but a lot of people don't know about it, or perhaps the modern artists that are celebrated might be different from those that other people might find interesting. So this is an image of an artist that I think is incredible named Rashid Chowdhury, and he was making tapestries in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And he studied in France, and actually met his French wife in art school there. They moved to Bangladesh, and he started making these beautiful tapestries, which are looking at the interconnections between Buddhist, Hindu, and Muslim folk traditions in the village. And they look very beautiful, but they're actually quite political for the time that they were made. But because these are tapestries, they weren't necessarily respected as fine art. So we started doing exhibitions of modern art, just to kind of fill in these gaps in art history.
Yeah.
Go
No,
ahead.
I was going to say
Yeah.
that you, from what you were saying, and which I found also astonishing, is that you found at some point you realized that there is no platform for earlier art also. So in a way, you took over the role of a sort of modern museum to show what was happening before. And
also taking lots of loans from collectors, from embassies. So we found works that like people thought were lost. Another very interesting fact is that from 1947 to 1971, Bangladesh was called East Pakistan. It didn't exist as a country. So actually you have a period of artworks that, unless you know what to look for, are lost because they're no longer in Pakistani books. There were no Bangladeshi books. Even some of the artists changed the spelling of their name in solidarity with Bangladesh. So like there's one artist named Murtaza Bashir. If you look in the Asia Art Archive, you need to look under two names because he spelled his name differently based on when he was working. So also and most of the money in that time was in Pakistan. So the West Pakistanis were buying East Pakistani artworks. So making collaborations to be able to bring these works back and find them. I could go on about this for a long time. I'll keep going. But what's beautiful about this presentation in 2016 is that now we're in touch with the family who lives in the US actually, and kind of filling in some scholarship holes. But also Met has work, Tate has work, and there's a lot of research happening around the world about this artist that was pretty forgotten and unappreciated. He actually died pretty penniless, and the Bangladeshi government didn't pay him for the commission that he had made for the Louis Khan Parliament building, and there's letters where he's blaming them for his death because he couldn't pay his medical fees. I mentioned that, so the Daka Art Summit did not invent internationalism in Bangladesh. It was really there for a long time. We don't have time to dwell on this, but I mentioned that the Asian Art Biennale is the oldest continually existing biennial in Asia. It started in Bangladesh in 1981. Gwangju is 1995, so there's a huge gap there. But it was started by an artist who was in Japan and meeting other Asian artists and wanted to create this platform where artists from Asia could share their work. That was also a decolonial move because they wanted to move away from British imperialism, American imperialism, and look at like these shared relationships across Asia. At the time, I happened to be living in the Philippines, and I was speaking to an art historian in the Philippines who was researching a Filipino modern artist and said, you know, I think this guy was in the Philippines in the 80s, and I think he donated the Filipino pavilion to the country. And so we were actually able to go find these works, interview people who remembered being here, and kind of revive these histories of shared connections that no one was really talking about because no one really cared about what was happening in Bangladesh in the 80s. That's not the same anymore. But I think even the word summit, the coming together of people is so important. So we try to bring together as many people as possible to have their own conversations and catalyze their own projects, which we'll get to later. I also don't want to be the only curator. I love working with other people and supporting their research, and we don't try to work with kind of super curators that are too busy to spend time. We like to work with young people that we think have a long career trajectory ahead of them, because this research that we support in Bangladesh, where they come, they meet the artists, they do studio visits, will stay with them for long periods of time. So this was a beautiful exhibition curated by Cosmin Costinas, who now he's working at HKV, he's going to be the co-curator of the next Sydney Biennial, but this was kind of his first big major traveling show, and he wanted to look at the intersections between South and Southeast Asia. So most people look at Bangladesh relative to India or Pakistan, but actually money and visa-wise, it's easier to go to Thailand or Myanmar. Not anymore, but like, let's say at this time. There are soft power reasons why we look at Southeast Asia and South Asia. South Asia is a British former colonial term. Southeast Asia is a Cold War, American-centered political term. But actually, people don't really see themselves that way. And languages change, politics change, religions change, but weaving and textile patterns change far more slowly. So Cosmin is obsessed with textiles and was trying to draw these connections, but also how fundamentalism travels across many different religions. So the show traveled to Poland, to Myanmar, to Hong Kong, to Norway, to Thailand, to Dhaka. It traveled for about 3 years. And this research stays with him, and you see it popping up in other encounters. So for us, that supportive curatorial research is a core part of the mission and strategy. But also because of the engagement for the local artists.
And now we come to the moment that we were talking about, Rakib Show.
Yeah.
And this is like out of talking to Diana for a few days before this talk, it became to me so obvious that this is such an important part of what you're doing. Maybe we should say first about how lovely this project is, and then
cool.
And then
so this happened in DAS 2018. And this was a project that took about 2 years to realize. And I think for most people, or a lot of art world people, this was a sign of like pinnacle success of the summit, that it had like made it or something. What you're looking at is a woman looking at this project by Rakib Shah, who is a Kashmiri diaspora artist now living in London, but had to move to exile to India because of the fundamentalism in Kashmir. He was belittled and made fun of as a Muslim gay man in India. He didn't want to have a show in India. He wanted his first big show in the region to be in Bangladesh. I should also mention logistically, there is no art insurance in Bangladesh. We have no art handlers in Bangladesh. There's no climate control in Bangladesh. Yet somehow the now director of Tate, Maria Balshaw, was working at the Whitworth, and she is also very good at partnerships. So she found that if 5 South Asian organizations collaborated with 5 Northern England organizations, they could get £750,000 from the Arts Council of England to do joint projects. So I was quite young at that time, and that sounded really great. Like, wow, that's a lot of money. Like, what would I do if I had that money? And, I thought, it had to be with someone with a UK connection. I thought it would be, also we try to push the queer narrative in Bangladesh as far as we can as well. And to show this in Bangladesh would be interesting. Rakib's parents were antiques dealers, so we came up with this idea that we would do a show where Rakib's work would be contextualized in a room where he would take South Asian objects in exile from the Manchester Museum collections and also the National Museum of Bangladesh collections and contextualize the work in a room. We built a climate-controlled room. The gallery insured the works. The co-curator became the director of Tate. Suddenly we have this like massive project where in each of these paintings is like £1 million. People really liked this project, but in the end of it, I looked at it and I was like, why? It was great. People really loved it, but like artworks in South Asia are not made in these conditions. This is really bad for the environment. Bangladesh is ground zero for climate change. The cost of couriering the Japanese prints from the Whitworth to Dhaka was more than buying them at auction. Like, it was just this kind of ridiculous thing of what does it cost to make Western museum conditions in Asia, and should we be doing this? The other thing is there's the Getty is funding a tropical conservation research initiative. So let's say you take a work from the Philippines and throw it into Western climate conditions and put it back, it's actually going to damage the work. So, this is a really complicated thing. We're also a festival for 9 days. We are not a museum. So I'm not advocating for all museums to throw away climate control. I'm just saying we decided to do things differently.
I think this is such an important moment because a lot of people say, okay, American curator in Bangladesh, you're sort of bringing Western art there. And I guess after all the years you had worked there, I think this is such, and it definitely makes us all think, okay, yes, there are different conditions here and we can have insurance and we can have some climate control. But I think the whole idea of not wasting resources in order to have an exhibition and sort of being more aware of the conditions around us. And for me, this is such an important moment for Daka, for you, but I think for all of us to think about when we do projects. So, the next show at the Cycladic will be only local. No, I'm just kidding. But, every country has a different situation and story, but this I find extremely amazing. And Diana will tell us more about how they move on after this.
So we decided, actually the most important thing for us is the artist and the work of art. And of course you have to protect the work of art. But I think that's why people really love the summit, is actually we show really remarkable works of art, but also through that commitment of the artist. So I mentioned Nilima Sheikh before, but this is a beautiful mural that Nilima Sheikh made for the 2020 Daka Art Summit. She worked almost 2 years on this. Only on this, and it was at a time where Kashmir was actually, they were cutting off the internet. It was a really dire time for that. It was always been dire, but it was like the next level of dire for that. In South Asia, narrative scrolls are a way that people share their culture. I also wanted to challenge this idea. This 2020 summit was really about challenging these ideas of like, why does culture need to be shown in a Tate-like room? So this room is not the most beautiful room, as you can see. You can see the ceiling is not very nice, the floor is pretty awful, but this is the space we have within the building that has AC and climate control all the time. We didn't build anything new. We decided to actually place works in the building where they could go and where they could live, and to kind of make work for the building as opposed to trying to change the building to show work, if that makes sense. So this work is now, I can't say which, but has been acquired by like a major Western museum, and it will be in climate control and more people can see it. But for her and for a lot of the artists, it's really important that people in their region and their community get to see it. And it's not just that these superstar South Asian artists are only showing outside. And so we give them a platform to do this and to be seen by masses of people. Also, because of the political situation in India, she probably could not show this work in India. So Bangladesh allows that kind of opportunity. Another scroll, which we're getting to another example of how we shifted, this is the same area where I showed kind of these large white walls and a blue immersive work by Sandeep Mukherjee. The space actually has columns, and you'll see more as we go. It's an open plaza. It's actually open to the elements. And so we worked with Savvy Contemporary in Berlin. Some of you might be familiar with them. And Jyoti Shilpa, which is an initiative in Dhaka to work with cinema banner painters to make a timeline of Afro-Asian solidarity movements. And these red poles you're seeing are rented metal scaffolding from construction sites. So basically at the end of this, like the wall, because we're actually hanging artworks on the back of this, the wall is an artwork and the scaffolding goes back to the construction site and there's no carbon footprint. So we tried to work with designers to think through this. Some of you may be familiar with this artist, Adrián Villar Rojas, who had a beautiful project here with Leon, with Elena. But also this idea, this is actually the same space that you saw with the performance here. So we basically try to transform the building every time. But we're also trying to challenge this idea of regionalism as being geographic. So on the floor you have these like, you know, almost 400 million year old Orthoceras and Ammonite fossils from a time that like the world was Pangea, right? The Earth's plate shifted. At one point you could walk from Australia to India. And so we started to think, like the geographic remit of the summit started to shift to think about shared struggles as opposed to shared borders, because borders are manufactured entities. We started a think tank for this kind of design technique. So how could it was like, we're thinking about exhibition unmaking and making. So how do we think about?
Because then it goes so fast.
Sorry,
I want to address, so this was another important moment.
Yeah.
So you decided to sort of think about, can you clarify it a little bit?
Sure. So what I wanted to do, which I had to fight very hard for it, but it succeeded, was just to show an image where I found an image. Oops. So here is what the space looks like now. It took a long time, but the space naturally is an open plaza. But because we had this colonial mindset that we didn't have large rooms to show artworks in, we thought it was a problem. Actually, it's an opportunity. So sometimes it takes a big team to convince people of that. So I got a grant from the Swiss Arts Council Pro Helvetia to put together a group of designers, architects, environmentalists, where we actually measured the carbon footprint of the 2018 summit, the one with the Rakib Shah project, and tried to come up with solutions to reduce it for the future one. So basically, you know, we're making models of the building, figuring out, okay, what art, before, like, you know, I'm a curator, I like to make narratives with my show, so it was a little bit off-putting when suddenly the designers were like, no, you cannot have those artworks in that order, it is bad for the environment or for circulation. I really didn't like that, but suddenly I realized they were right. So it's, and the entire team got involved in this process, and we're very lucky this happened, because in the way that the audience started to spike, we would have had major traffic problems if we continued to build those rooms. It is necessary for that to be open. But to even convince the patrons who thought that all of their friends wanted to be in air conditioning and that we couldn't possibly have an open plaza, like it took, you know, a lot of trust, and I have to really give them, like, they're amazing to work for, because they see themselves as the hosts of this project and they love this project, but they kind of trust professionals to express themselves creatively. So we were able to make the case to do it, and now everyone is much happier for it. But it's a big mental shift to move from a AC Rakib Shah room to like an open plaza with cinema banner paintings. And I should also say that these same cinema banner painters who did this were the ones who did the Documenta project for Brito. So it gave them a bigger opportunity to have their works shown as well.
So, and I think you said not only of the setting up the exhibition, but even what happens to the elements when it gets
Yeah, so we
dismantled.
want to recycle as much as we can when it comes down. So anything we build, we try to think about what happens when it goes away. However, we do think that materials should travel as little as possible, but we do think it's important for people to travel because these ideas need to move and people need to connect. So we collaborated with most biennials or exhibitions. They kind of keep art historians separate, but here we wanted to bring them into the fold. So we had this program called Mahasa, which is modern art histories across Africa, South and Southeast Asia, which we realized in partnership with the Getty Foundation, Asia Art Archive, and Cornell. So 21 art historians had meetings over the course of a year, so 2 weeks in person in Hong Kong, 2 weeks in person in Dhaka, and remote learning all the way through to try to look at what were these connections between these regions without North America or Europe in the middle, because not everything had to go through Paris or London or New York. And so this group is still in touch, they're still communicating, and again, it's not... We love just being a place that convenes people to share ideas and what happens with that after they leave. And I think they also appreciate it because usually they feel like they're left out of these events, but they're very much a core part of it. We also produce a lot of artworks, and we learn through the production process. It can be really hell at the beginning, but then you learn over time. And so this is an image of a performance by a Mexican artist named Hector Zamora, which happened in the 2020 Daka Art Summit. And almost every culture has this image of women holding water on their head. So here the artist worked with ceramic pot makers to make, I think, almost 2,000 wet clay pots that women would start smashing in kind of defiance of that. But even what's the technology you need to figure out how to keep 2,000 wet clay pots wet in time for the performance while still making it? We figured it out, but I'm showing this because this technique, we still work with these guys in different ways, but it's, we meet new communities each time we work to collaborate, and also experiment with different formats. So also in 2020, Cora Crit was working with mud and clay and wet clay, but also we shut off all of the lights at 7 o'clock so that the exhibition space became a stage. And we're really looking at this idea of ritual. So I think ritual is something that has come far more into the last summit than you had seen before. But these two projects from 2020 made this project in 2023 possible, which is by a South African architect named Sumaya Valley. And it's called They Who Bring Rain, Bring Life. And it was looking at how almost every culture, that rainmaker, or that person with the ability to call rain, has a sort of power. And so every day, so it's a pavilion made out of fired and unfired clay pots made by the same people as Hector's project. But every day women would come and wash down the unfired pots, which would dissolve, and there would be musicians that would play it like an instrument. So the piece would kind of evoke thunder. But I also bring this up because I wanted to show this work in Desert X, but this work would cost around $350,000 to do in the US just because of, craft exists in a different way. So in Bangladesh, all of these people are paid fairly, they're collaborating, but there's certain things that are possible to do in one place and impossible to do in another. So rather than lament the kind of things we can't show, we want to celebrate what we can. This is a performance, but sometimes these performances are not just performances, and I bring this up as an example. This performance was realized by a group called the Ιδρύματος Foundation for the Arts, who we've been working with since 2016, and we continue to work with them, and also this community of children. So what's great is you actually see these kids growing up over time. But this organization has been working for about 20 years in the northwest of Bangladesh in a place where the community is mostly climate migrants. So they're moving from within their own country because the lands are flooding to ground further north. But what you see there that's so interesting is that it's actually people from different cultural, religious, ethnic communities, but they kind of make a community through culture. And I haven't really been anywhere else in Bangladesh where I'm seeing Muslims, Hindus, and indigenous people sitting together having a meal, and it's very, very beautiful and powerful. But what's powerful about this performance is that this organization really wanted to make these artists stars. Artists meaning the kid artists. And why was that? Because they wanted their parents to see the value in culture for these kids. So suddenly girls are being enrolled in secondary school. It's actually changing the way that this community works. One of the girls has just been invited to be an apprentice to a puppeteer in Paris. The community is really proud. Like, there's also museums that commission them for projects, pay them artist fees. The artist fees go to the families. So like, this is not just an exhibition, it's actually making a massive change outside of the exhibition.
Which is the fourth element that I want to, stay at, which, a lot of us don't think about when we think about art projects, that not only you give a platform to artists, you bring artists to educate, but we see actually making a difference in the local community in more than just getting to know about art, right? Like really changing people's lives in a way by having art, which is what art should be.
And the artists are doing it all the time. It's just our role to be an amplifier to bring people to that, if that makes sense. Like, I can't possibly take credit for the work that Ιδρύματος is doing, but I feel proud to help bring people to see that. And actually, I should say that is a reaction to, we're very self-critical. So for example, we noticed that international curators would come to Dhaka and they would only invite the artists or institutions that spoke English and had a website. The most interesting artists in Bangladesh do not speak English and do not have a website. So it's, we decided that we had to kind of go out and the people that are actually like working, help them network. And, actually the Ιδρύματος team, they do speak English, but they don't have a good website. But it's really a reaction to that. And it's, I've learned so much, and I think it's actually applicable to a lot of contexts, that like sometimes the people doing the work can't possibly talk about it, network, like they really, institutions need to help them do what they do best.
And I think you're coming up soon with one of the projects that I love.
Me too.
That is sort of very related to what we're talking about.
Yeah. So we're getting into it in a minute, but this was a project by a Belgian performance artist who is mostly known for theater, but it's a piece called Chant for Hope, where, whenever something's really hard, like you're kind of like, come on. Like it's, she's looking at, she tried to take people into a trance by kind of writing a rap song, but she actually wrote the rap song in Bangla with a group of young people. So this guy you see with the short hair, so it was important that he's the only one with the short hair standing in the back, was one of our interns, and it was his dream to be a rapper. And one day he just started rapping, and she was like, all right, you're in the piece. And then my team started complaining, like, if you take all the interns and put them in the piece, we're gonna have no one working here anymore. So they made this like 45-minute like rap piece. Also, these guys aren't rappers, so they started adding auto-tune to like make it like work. But these are like young students that have never performed like this before. She auditioned them, and in the piece, so these are words in Bangla like if, never, but, hey, and so all these words are used in a repetitive way to kind of make a rhyme. And what you see on the floor are plaster molds. So the length of the performance is the time for the molds to dry, and these words are given out to people in the public. So a lot of you, if you Google Bangladesh, you're going to read about issues of freedom of speech. This isn't really a rap song, right? So it's also looking at that difficulty that it takes to actually express yourself. So a lot of the work is extremely political, even though it looks like it's fun and games.
Can I stop you there to just touch on the fact that from what we understand, there is some form of difficulties, let's say, at showing anything. There is like a religious respect that you need to show. So in a way, you find the ways to overcome this, right?
But I think that is because of, and every time we can push it because we understand what the limits are. So it's, we've never been censored by the Bangladeshi government. I'm not going to say we haven't by another government. You can Google it. I'm not going to say which one, but it's actually it's pretty great. But it's also like, for example, you're not really supposed to show nudity, but one of the most iconic works of Bangladeshi modern art has 2 nude female angels in it. So we actually try to show that as much as possible because no one will complain about that. So we try to remind people of where they come from when things get more difficult as they go along. So anyway, this artist Meet, she also had this piece that I loved, which she had shown and listened before, which is called The Board, which are these kind of giant suit pants that kind of walk through the space. And in Bangladesh, women wear the pants in the economics. So the economic growth is actually from female garment workers. They're the kind of economic backbone of the country. So we thought about making a female version of this piece with jeans, but to actually have garment factory workers performing in it. I'm giving the story before we go to the next images to give the background. But when these these women who work in a garment factory came to the space for the first time, they were so shy, they were so scared, they like didn't even want a male translator around. It was really, I thought I had crossed a cultural line that I thought I had made a big mistake. But actually, after like a few days of like engaging with the artists, these women became super confident and started like owning this thing. So basically, they wear these pants, they have paint inside, they start peeing on the wall and like making this painting. Like, but this happens after they walk around the space and they're making the artwork. So basically, they were able to kind of like break this third wall or break the fourth wall with the audience who like didn't know what they were looking at. But these women, like they brought their communities, they brought their kids, they brought their friends, and it was real. And they were paid like performers, not like garment factory workers. But it was incredible to also just see the possibilities of how like these 9 days can kind of change someone's reality, but also the way that the artist connected with them was also quite beautiful. And now one of the artists here, the tallest guy with his hair on top, is going to go on tour with her in Belgium, and he didn't have an identity card or a passport until now. So next, so this is a work by Antony Gormley. And Antony, for people who know me, they would probably be surprised that I would work with Antony Gormley, but actually I love Antony Gormley. And this happened because we had an interview, and I was also surprised like why I was being asked to interview him for a book. And it turned out that we both share these like transformative experiences in India. And he, as a young man in the 70s, before he went to art school, he spent 4 years in South Asia studying meditation. And when you know that and you see these figures, it's actually him trying to find that inside space that connects us with the universe. And it's very, very beautiful. And he hadn't been back in almost 50 years. So back to the region. So I invited him to come back, but I didn't want to ship anything. So we decided to do a collaboration with bamboo artisans, which happened primarily on WhatsApp and then in person. And this is a 2.5 kilometer line of bamboo, which is spiraling in and out of the building. And the entire work was recycled after. But it's an energy field, and kids were running through it. And it really had what I love is also Daka Art Summit gives artists a chance to like reinvent themselves or to experiment. I don't think this is something it's very much his work, but it's a departure that would be harder to do in another context. And for the local artists, they loved spending time with him. They loved meeting him. They loved, it was a really beautiful encounter. But for me, having Antony Gormley in the summit allowed me space to suddenly scale up young female artists. So I decided to put his work in conversation with some young female artists from the region who hadn't really had major shows yet. So this is a work by Basha Chakrabarti, who is now New York-based, but a Bengali diaspora artist who grew up in Hawaii. And she was inspired by caryatids, which you guys have here, obviously, but how, women are supposed to kind of hold up these buildings. But there's a practice in South Asia, also in Bengal, where people marry these plants which embody the spirit of the goddess Durga. And there's a thing of like revering plants but denigrating women. And so this piece, the theme of the summit was called Bonna, which means flood. So in Bangladesh, the way I'm Diana, or she's Afroditi, there's a name Bonna, which means flood. So people name their girls Flood, which means that flood doesn't just mean disaster, it's far more complex. But she took this word, bonna, and looked at the other version, bonno, which means wild and untamable, which is a word used to denigrate female sexuality. And so she decided to kind of take this head on. And this braid actually was a seating system, so people could sit on it and hang out and chat. And you can actually see Antony's piece from here. But as you can see, Antony's piece then looks quite small relative to these other female artists, who he loved sharing space with, by the way. This is a video game by a young Indian gamer and artist named Afra Shafiq. She also now has a gallery after Daka Art Summit, and you'll be seeing her work in some major institutions. But she made this sculpture of an anthill, which is actually just a holder for a video game, which was measuring people's emotions. So, like, are young Bangladeshis feeling fearful? Are they feeling nervous? Are they feeling hopeful? And actually, while this looks like a game, if you clicked on the ants, it would tell you things that young Bangladeshis were feeling. So some were like, I'm afraid, that this government doesn't protect me, or I'm afraid that my parents are lying to me. Like, it was quite subversive and real, but again, since it's in this kind of fun structure, you could take what you wanted out of it. But it was interactive, so if the emotions are too anxious, the game burns, and if the emotions are too joyous, it floods. And it is kind of different every time you're in there. Yeah.
Then, because we are already...
Okay.
I was thinking, and because I really want to get also to the museum and to the other, and to your, shall we just show images?
We can go faster.
And then go straight to a field so
Sure.
that you can...
So also we work with artists over time. It's also nice to, like, when artists come back and they learn about different ways of working. So this is a piece we made with Rana Begum, who's a British Bangladeshi artist who was born in Bangladesh. This was a piece she made with basket makers in 2014. She came back and made a piece inspired by fishermen in 2023. I'll keep going. This is, I love craft. That's a personal interest of mine. And this is a Bangladeshi artist and activist named Shaun Akhand, who was working now with like fast fashion. People don't have the resources, but two, the time to buy these beautiful Bangladeshi textiles that might take a year to make. So perhaps you're not going to spend $1,000 on a sari, but perhaps if it were a painting or an artwork, you might look at it differently. So he was working with weavers to paint motifs of his paintings as weaving. And I love the title, which is like Slow Friend Be Slow. And it's like celebrating that slow process, which is very much how we work as well. So like we gestate projects over long periods of time. Our art mediators are also a really important part of what we do. So we have 160 of them, and we have a crazy WhatsApp group where literally if like, you know, you can keep track of like what's happening in the whole space at all times. Yeah.
And you said, which I actually loved, that they are not just people who come to talk about the works as we normally do, but in fact they're part of the working on with the exhibition.
Yeah, they're working with the artists. They're now working with me. Actually, they're a core part of the next curatorial statement. Like in fact, their words will be in it. I'm removing myself from it, and it's you know it's ideas that I'm part of, but like it's going to be in their voice. And I mean, Ahmed could speak to them. They're really fantastic and enthusiastic, and they love it, and it's great. So I'm gonna go, but I really believe that art can change the world. I mean, art can change art, which can change the world, but I am not really interested. I mean, I enjoy beautiful objects, but like I think that there is something that art does outside of art exhibition spaces that can be transformative, and I want to support that kind of practice. So I'm part of an international network of cultural changemakers called A Field. We have one of our network members in here. Theo, where are you? So he can tell you so Theo's here, but it's basically we believe that artists are fundamental to the fabric of society as thinkers, visionaries, and change makers. We try to provide resources and support. There's a lot of Bangladeshi people working this way. So for example, like microfinance was invented in Bangladesh, and there's a lot of artists that are creating platforms. So we try to connect them and create this sort of network. And I bring them into the fold of Daka Art Summit, and I'm really trying to bring them into the fold of our Future Art Center as well. So we give fellowships annually to practitioners who initiate social projects that empower their communities in long-term ways. So for example, some of our fellows were like Leah Rodriguez, who's an award-winning choreographer who some of you might know. She created a dance school in her favela. She informs the dance school informs her. We have here Theo Prodromidis, who has a project in Piraeus, who some of you might know, the Open School for Immigrants. Another person who I'm very inspired by, Yasmin Larry, who's the first woman to win the Reba Prize since Zaha Hadid since 1890. So making mud architecture, not waiting for Western development aid, but actually building from the ground up with beautiful structures of dignity. But we see how like one artist can, you know, can have such huge ripple effects. And I think that's what you see in the Daka Art Summit as well, is really supporting those people who have ripple effects all over the world. And so I don't, as I mentioned with that Adrian project, I don't see the world in regions anymore. I really see it in terms of shared struggles and shared potential solidarity.
And looking at this map, and also thinking about the fact that you have been, like, you know, grew up in LA, studied in New York, you work in South Asia, and you recently decided to, I accepted and worked with another big project, Desert X, And this is when we come to the third, that, you know, I kind of realized talking with you that, of course, you had the same vision with you have the same vision with Samdani Foundation, but you have a particular interest in working with projects that really address the issues of like social or climate, or like you told me I would never just show an object at Desert X that people come and photograph. So shall we
Sure.
get into the...
So this is an artist named Lauren Bond in Metabolic Studio, and her mantra is that artists need to create at the same scale with which society has the capacity to destroy. And she one day called me like almost crying, being like, why can't people write about this work? I mean, there's a reason, you'll see in a minute, because this work is not something you can just come take a picture of. It's a process-based work. So what she did was she looked at the Coachella Valley in California, which is like near Palm Springs, has one of the world's largest ecological disasters called the Salton Sea. It was a man-made ecological disaster. It's super toxic. Anyone growing up around there has major asthma problems. It's also tied to class because there's certain income levels that live around there. But this whole area was also once under the water, so blue whales were swimming through there, and the largest heart, I guess, that's been found is the heart of the blue whale. She's also very into science and collaborates with scientists, and there's a process where if you link, I guess, steel with an electrical charge, it starts a process called accretion that will pull toxins and salts out of the water. So she made this to-scale stainless steel blue whale heart, connected it to solar panels, and filled a pool of a modernist abandoned hotel with salt and seawater. And so over the course of the exhibition, the artwork was cleaning the water. And this was a process-based work. You could only go at night. There's a microphone, so you're actually hearing the process, but you needed to actually like be there, see it, and watch it change over time. So I am interested in projects like this, where it's not a flash moment, but it's like, it's a process. So this work is now actually in the Salton Sea, and she's collaborating with scientists to study it further. But I'm sharing a few things because we're going to be opening a sculpture park, and we want more projects like this than these kind of, you know, bronze sculptures that look the same every day. The other thing is that the history of land art is often dominated by, I hate to say it, but, you know, white men. There's not much space for women or people of color just because they didn't have the resources. So I really tried to challenge that in this exhibition. So it was mostly women and mostly people of color, but because of the work, not because of demographics. But I also show this image. So this is by Rana Begum, the artist that I worked with the baskets and the fishing nets. This is a work made out of chain link fence, and it was actually the most visited artwork according to the app. But the reason I show this image is because it just shows a difference in approach of institutions. This artwork never looked like this. It was always full of people, always swarming with people. It was always like celebrated with people. But I don't understand why all of the images are like a single person looking at this artwork. So it's, I think that, and I'm using this as I'm closing the talk because I really think that these projects are about people. They're how people engage with it. It's how it changes people's thinking. It's how it brings people joy. And what I love about Bangladesh is that actually people associate it with disaster, but it is such a joyful place of hope and of solutions. This was a work by an indigenous artist, Gerald Clark, which was a maze. So you had to play a card game about indigenous history to get to the middle. No one can pass that card game, so anyone that goes in there is cheating, and that's the entire point of the piece, because that's how the West was conquered, was people cheating. This is an amazing project by a Bangladeshi female architect named Marina Tabassum. It's a $500 home that can move when your land floods. So the money is in the metal joints. If it floods, you can go up to the second floor. It's modular, so you can put them together and make like a community, but it can also move. So this is an entry point as to like what I think is most interesting about Bangladesh is this possibility. People aren't waiting for resources. They're doing what they can with what they have. And that leads to our beautiful future building, which will open next year. But when I say open, we really want to open to the local community so that when all of you come in, the kids can welcome you and tell you exactly what this is. So we've been working on projects with the kids since 2016, but so next year in far more depth, there'll be Bangladeshi artists in residence. So there's 11 apartments where artists can stay, live, and work. There's a gallery which is showing the Samdani's collection, and we'll be, you know, realizing projects like the Lauren Bond project, or we have a project with an Indian artist, which is a bamboo forest, which takes 20 years to grow in. We're 6 years in, but in the end, we'll play like a flute when the wind blows through it. So it's a place also in the area with the highest rainfall. So we're actually trying to collaborate with rain, collaborate with the weather, rather than complain that we have a sculpture park in a floodplain. So with that.
Diana, yes, at this point I wanted to say that when I started talking with Diana the first times, I realized that after talking to Diana, I always felt so very happy and optimistic afterwards. And I honestly would like to thank you for, I think we all know the success of Daka, but we didn't quite know all the aspects of it, and how much thought and work goes into the local society and ecology. And you actually, honestly, made me very optimistic that, you know, some people think like that around the world, and you are obviously the younger generation, and it's super, exciting, and thank you for making all this happen and for telling us about it. I know we've run late, but if anyone wants, if there are some questions, anyone?
I think she deserves it.
Yeah. Before you go, I would like to thank the CSE for supporting this series of talks. And we did try very hard to convince Diana to come because she's traveling all the time around the world. So Maria, who helps me with this program, is somewhere here. Maria and I were sort of sending emails like, are you sure? Can you come then? When can you come? And insisting, and eventually she gave up and decided to come. And thank you. Thank you. It was amazing to hear.
Yeah, and thanks to all of you. And I really saw some amazing art when I was out here. So it was definitely worth the trip. And I'm really happy to have made it.
Sorry, there will be drinks on the balcony, so you can all ask more questions.
Yes.